Hey everyone. This week it's going to be all about ham radio, so giving you that up front. We're going to talk about digital modes today. Specifically, we're going to talk about JS8 call, which is the JS8 protocol, FT8, Winlink, and a new one called Varac. So let's get started here. Now, if you're familiar with digital modes, you're probably most familiar with DMR. And by the way, what I talk about here today, I do not get any profits or kickbacks from anything I mention. But so if you've got DMR, you've got two ways that you can talk on DMR, right? You can talk to a repeater that's connected in, or you can buy a small hotspot for your house. I've got a boomerang hotspot that I just got that has two antennas on it, one for transmit, one for receive. So it works on two different frequencies. And I've got a new Baofeng DM32UV that I picked up. Both are doing a good job. I use my hotspot because while I have a repeater, the repeater is miles away from here, and occasionally there's problems getting to the repeater, or we get, because it's a DMR format, it's a digital format. If the signal gets corrupted, you can get repeats, you can get tones, you can get all kinds of interesting artifacts in your sound. So because I run a Tuesday night net some of the time at 8 p.m. on Talk Group 3150 in Vermont, I wanted to make sure that I could run the net should something happen. So I've got the repeater and I've got the hotspot. If one isn't working, I'll switch to the other, or I might just use the hotspot as I did this week to test it out. Both have been working beautifully, both the radio and the hotspot. Now you might say, well, but in emergency communications, right, a hotspot's not going to work. Well, it might be able to. This hotspot, the Boomerang, has both a wired and a wireless connection. That's one of the reasons I wanted to get it, because if I have a problem with a hotspot like I just did, where somehow lost the Wi-Fi connection, getting in there to change it is a pain. I wanted one that I could just get to the IP address regardless of whether it was on or off, and I wanted to test out the new setup. But in emergency communications, where you don't have internet, for example, depending on how the DMRs are set up in your state, if they're connected to the internet, they could go down. If they're connected to each other, well, at least they'll be able to talk to each other in some fashion, just like the linked UHF repeaters that we have. Now, that's not to say that it's not going to be usable, because perhaps the internet is only down in the disaster area and not in the area you're in. And so it makes a great way to go. If, however, you need something different, now we're going to talk about the HF modes that I've been using. Now, a quick way to test out how your system's going is Whisper. I'm throwing that in just as a way of, once you get your system set up and you think it's working okay, put Whisper on. It's a very low power. I've got a contact from over 10,000 miles away using Whisper. I use about 5 to 7 watts of power. And like I said, it's a great way to test out your HF system, make sure that it's working and that you've got everything configured properly. Personally, I like Ham Radio Deluxe. The reason I like it is because it has a logbook attached to it, and it can take the feed directly from things like FT8, the WSJT-X software suite, which also does Whisper, by the way. It can just take the feed directly from there and add it into the logbook. And I like the interface that I get for the radio with Ham Radio Deluxe. Now, all of these usually have some kind of way of interfacing on their own. The JS8, because it's a WSJT spinoff, uses the same back programming to it. They can both connect to Ham Radio Deluxe. FLDigi and Winlink have their own setup to them. So when we're talking about communication, we're talking about what kind of communication do we want to use. Whisper, like I said, it's great for testing out your system. It's not a communications method. It's a beacon method. It's a hear and respond method. And you can go to the Whisper website, just like you can for APRS, and see if your traffic is being heard. So that's why I suggest it for a testing system, because you don't need anybody else. You can get your stuff set up and then just see how your system's working. When we're going beyond that and we actually want to have a conversation, you've probably seen FLDigi. There's some forms that go with that. Not a fan of FLDigi at this point for certain types of communications. So when you're talking about what kind of communication, I break things down into two different categories. If I'm talking about something simple, and by simple I mean, for example, a weather report, right? Temperature, weather conditions, how much precipitation you've gotten, type of precipitation you've gotten, wind conditions, meaning direction and speed. Do you have any damage? Is your power on? That can be handled in a single line of text. You can do that with JS8. You can do that with FT8. If you really just pop it into one of the generated messages and replace it with that information, you can send it by FT8. You can do it by FLDigi, right? Type in your information. I like to use FLDigi this way. I type what I want out on a notepad application, copy, paste it in there, and then send it, so that I'm not typing at the same time that it's sending, and I can watch it go out. It also means that I'm not sending extra signals, because if I backspace because I typed something wrong, I'm not sending out that extra character because it's all copied and pasted. But then there's more complicated things. And this is where the FLDigi forum would come in, or Winlink would come in. And that is where it can present you with a form that you can put multiple pieces of information in. Let's say you're talking to a shelter, and the shelter has a list of requirements that they want. By putting it into a form, as opposed to copy and pasting it in FLDigi, you can fill out a form, or somebody could fill out a form and hand it to you, and then you could just type the stuff in that you see on the form, and then the form goes out. The nice part about Winlink is it has the option, which I've been playing with, that you can send out a PDF file. So if all you needed was a PDF file, and this is only going to an internet address, by the way, you've got an image of the form that you could file. I also send out the data in both cases as data. And if you've got Winlink and you're going Winlink to Winlink, and you've got the form loaded on both sides, when it shows up, it'll show up in the form on your Winlink when you receive it. Otherwise, it's a text document that gets attached to the email, and it's very easy to take that text document, extract the information out, and go. Now, you can also use that for weather, and there's a wonderful weather form for that as well. But I'm thinking more of the more complicated ICS 213 type forms, supply request type forms, information about the status of a shelter. Obviously, we don't want to be sending names out here because all of the stuff can be captured. But a shelter can tell you that it's got a capacity of 50 and it's currently got 15, right? So it's got another 35 people that it can take. That can go out in a form with all the other information about that shelter. Is it in danger of being flooded, or is it in danger of losing power, etc.? So again, FT8, simple 1 or 2 line things in it. JS8, I've been using it, or I'm trying to use it here, for propagation. All right, you can send out an SNR ? To all call. And if people have their system set up, they will automatically reply to your call. It allows you to see where your signal's getting to, right? Because you can always look up a call sign, and call signs are attached to all these things. So you can look up a call sign, at least find out what town it came from. But using it to see, I'm here in Bennington, who can I hear? Or you're in Burlington, who can you hear? You're in Rutland, who can you hear? And who can hear you is important to get for passing information from point to point. FLDigi is a broadcast methodology, just like the other ones are, except when you're talking FT8 or JS call, you can actually pin it directly to a person, right? You're sending it to an individual. It doesn't mean that everybody else can't hear it, but it does mean that it's a one-to-one relationship. JS8 call also allows you to do all calls, so you can send it out to everybody, but you can pick a person and send it directly to that person. Winlink has two methodologies to it. One is it can go out to a server and then pass it on to everybody else. For example, let's say you were sending a form out to email addresses, and I believe you can do call signs as well. For example, winlink.org, I believe, is the domain that goes on the end of a call sign. So you can send things out that way, as well as send it to an internet address. So that allows you two methodologies to send out stuff. So if you send something to Alpha Charlie 1 Indy X-ray at winlink.org, that's me, I will get it. It'll sit on a server until I pick it up. So that's one of the advantages of Winlink. Other advantage of Winlink, other than the forms that we talked about earlier, is you can do point-to-point. So if a shelter was calling into a particular person, right? So somebody's at the, we're doing net control for emergency command center, and somebody, the shelters are sending in the information, they can send it point to point. It can go directly to that person. Sending it out requires a bit of modem type things. For everybody who's used to old school dial-up modems, kind of the same way. It's a little different than the digital modems we have today coming in from our fiber lines. Now, there's one that comes with it, and I've tried that out a couple times, and I'm not a fan of it. And the other one is Varac FM or Varac HF. And those are, it's a particular piece of software that plugs in that sends your information out. Again, you've got the ability to make up a form with Winlink. You've got the ability to send a form with Winlink. You've got ability to send it out as a PDF to somebody who has an internet address on Winlink. And you've got that mailboxing system on Winlink, where everything could go into a mailbox and then come back down. So you're sending it outside of the disaster area, and then it can go out to the internet to everybody it needs to, or it can be on that mailbox and somebody can go call that mailbox or call into the system and get their messages back. The other thing it has is it does propagation, so it lets you know what are the best servers that you could try to connect to. And then again, you've got the point-to-point possibilities that you have with Winlink, or sorry, with FT8 and JS8. So overall, for certain communications, I think this works out better. For the more complicated stuff, right? The weather forecasting one, for example, that they have, presents you with a form that you can just check off what the weather conditions are like. So ease of use is another primary reason to use a form, regardless of what you're sending it out from. Having a form that has everything laid out for you that you can just check boxes on makes it much easier to handle and to send out. And it makes it easier for the other person to get and see, because if they've got one or two things, they're either getting the PDF form that they can just pop it open and look at it, or they're getting the raw data, or they're getting the data, and the data is being able to open up in their form so they can see the form in front of them. That leads to a lot of possibilities for emergency communication, and I know some places, at least I've heard it on the West Coast, this is their primary mode of doing it. Forms are fairly easy to make. I'm redoing the weather form because it's much, much more complicated. I think it was more for Hurricane Alley than it is the type of stuff that I have here. In Vermont, I'm more interested in, while wind is progressively becoming more of an issue here in Vermont, snowfall, rainfall, right, for flooding and for what's the snow weight that the roofs are going to have to carry, as well as what current conditions are. And they had a ton of current conditions. I think I'm probably just going to make that a comment that they could put in, because that's not as critical, at least when we report it to the Weather Service. What is critical is your location. And one of the things that you get with Winlink, with the form that they've got set up for weather, is you're still putting in where the report is from, right? So typically it's cross street. What are your cross streets? But it's also sending out the latitude and longitude. So if you're home and you're reporting from home about the conditions at home, your address is going to match that latitude and longitude, and that lets the Weather Service, who we're reporting this stuff overall to, know exactly where that report is from. But you maybe went out and saw it, and now you're reporting it from your home. So you always have to keep that in mind, whether if that latitude and longitude is valuable to your report. But that is auto-populated for you. But again, the form allows you that ease of use. I've barely taken a look at the FLDigi ones, but there's methods to do that. And that leaves us with Varac. Now, Varac apparently is based off of the Vara formula, Vara modem as the back end. The algorithm that compresses and sends things out rapidly, which, making sure that everybody is clear on all this stuff, costs $75 an individual license at this point. You can, or you could, get group licenses of batches of 10, which gave you a discount. But you can use it for free, but apparently it runs at about 10% the speed that it normally would, which means that when I'm sending out a form, it takes a little while for the form to go out. Varac is more of a chat setup. So it's more like JS8 in that you're sending out something using the Vara modem over HF, and you're talking back and forth to each other. And they have it over multiple frequencies, and they do weekly calls and all kinds of things that they've got going on with that application. And they have an entire NCOM, emergency communications package built into it that I haven't had a chance to look at or evaluate yet. And there is an enterprise license if you're going to use it for commercial, but for CBers and ham radio operators, it's free. So I've got to check that out next and see what I think of that. But again, what I'm looking for with any of this stuff is a couple of factors. Factor one, what's its ease of use and setup, right? Like I said, if you can get Whisper set up and running, regardless of whether you're using something like Ham Radio Deluxe in the back end or you're doing the setup right inside the application, that'll help you once you've got that set up, because Whisper is part of the WSJT. You've got Whisper, you've got FT8 bundled together in there. Because it's the same type of configuration that JS8 does, you're just going to be able to mirror what you did for the WSJT stuff and carry it over to JS8. So once you've got that as your background, it's easier. It's easy to pick it up and move it on to the next thing. Even if it's something different like Winlink, which will give you a little bit different configuration. I love the propagation in Winlink. Because if you're talking about JS8 or you're talking about the other protocols that WSJT handles, they're a fixed frequency that they use. But here, you're calling out to a server in Winlink, so it takes a look at the propagation and ranks the propagation for you so you can see it. So if you're having problems getting to server 1, you can go to server 2 or server 3 or server 4. You click it, it tries to connect. It'll let you know if the channel's busy or not. I really like that in an application. So having a form, I think, is important. I like the fact that this has mailboxes to it for the purposes of sending stuff out. Because if I've got a form, I've got something I can keep for my records. Right? If it comes up on the screen, I got to screenshot it, fine. But it gives me a form that I can keep and we can put in for the records for the emergency communications. That's one for me. So ease of use. Do I have something that I can store in the records and keep? How easy is it to find where I need to go? Right? So like, for example, JS8 has the ability of creating a group and people joining the group. So if you were to think about something like a hospital or a shelter where the people working the radios may turn over, but at the same time, while they're going to turn over, you just want to send it to the hospital. You don't want to have to know who is there at the hospital. So by having that kind of configuration that you can set up, then you can just put everybody who's in the hospital can join the group and it will go to the group. So whoever happens to be on the radio at the time will get that message because they're part of the group that the message was sent to. I haven't seen that in Winlink yet, but again, I'm just starting to play around with these things and getting the feel for what is best for this and what I think is best for emergency communications. Ease of use, something you can record, being able to set up something so that it's easy to send to a group. And again, I'm going to say it again, retention. You're going to need to keep the information that was sent, and it needs to be sent quickly, and it needs to be sent legibly. And when you've got something like Varac doing that transmission, yes, it took a while because it's only at 10%. So if I take a look at how long it took me to send out a short weather forecast or weather report that I did on it, so that it would go out over the internet response was very quick, but the sending took a few minutes to send it out. You can also drop the bandwidth down on Winlink, so you can go with 500 hertz if you really want to try it that way. And that allows you to send it out relatively quickly. Again, if I was at 10% and let's say it took 10 minutes, it would take a couple minutes, right? A minute, two, to send it out if I was using the full package for Varac. Varac, I've got to get loaded up on the laptop that I use and see how it works. Again, a lot of things are going to depend on what you've got for hardware that you're going to hook up to it. Because if you're going to be running this and you're running on emergency power, you're going to want to be as low powered as possible. The WSJT suite can run on a Raspberry Pi. I'm not sure about the other ones yet. I've got everything running on a laptop, so for me, that's more convenient than trying to set up any of the couple of Pis that I've got around here to hook up to these devices at this time. So that's what I'm looking for, right? Basis of emergent communication. Easy to use. You can send stuff out quickly. You can be precise in what you're sending, and you've got something for your records. Even if it's text files that come to you, you can save the text files off. Even if somebody doesn't know a way to open it up in a form, at least they have the data that went with that form. And being able to make up your own forms, I think, is important in whatever we're doing as well, because there's certain things that are just going to be specific. As I said, this one that I've got for the weather is a beautiful form. It's nicely put together. It's got a ton of information that you can put on it. I don't need as much, right? My National Weather Service up here wants to know what the temperature is like, what the wind is like, what the overall conditions are like. Is there any damage? Is the power on? What's the precipitation been? Right? Wind direction, speed. It's pretty simple. Where are you? What are the conditions like on these 4 little parameters, basically? Right? Conditions, temperature, wind speed direction, and precipitation. Doesn't want a lot more than that. So I can take that form that they've got, which is a beautiful, like I said, it's a beautiful form, and I can modify that form because it's got certain things in it that I want, like the requirement for you to put in your latitude and longitude, or the fact that it feeds it, and what your direction, what your streets are. And I can just utilize that as the part. It asks for who the reporter is for the conditions, but to me, for what we're doing, the reporter is going to be the same as the person who's sending the form in, so I don't need to ask it twice. So certain things like that, I'll just take off of it, put a straight box in the bottom that says, hey, give me conditions, and if there's damage or power outage, then that can just be in a box. And I'm looking at less than a half dozen fields that have to be on this form, which will make the form a lot shorter, which will make it send a lot quicker, and it have a lot less information to it, but it's information that we don't really need. Every one of those little check boxes that they've got for the different weather conditions, while it looks nice on the form, is its own little line of data that gets sent out. And if I don't have them, it's less data going. It goes quicker. So the Varac, I've got to go see what actually that will give us for emergency communications possibilities. But again, as we move on in emergency communications, ham radio operators do a lot of talking. If you listen to these podcasts, you hear that I do a lot of talking. But talking is not always the most efficient way to get your information across. I mean, right now I'm well over 27 minutes of talking, and a lot of this thing could have been done in a blog post that would have looked a lot shorter and been a lot quicker. But when you're sending out lists of information, especially if it's something that could be hard to hear, so that you have to now rely on phonetically spelling out what it is that you're sending out or that you're requiring, digital modes are going to be the way to go. And once you've got a digital mode, if it can talk to different things, and the Varac also claims that it can do satellite, if it can talk to different things, then you have a universal tool that you can use. Not to say that you're going to use that necessarily in all situations, or that you don't have to have other things around there as backups, just in case there's something wrong with that particular application. But this gives you a way to send information out quickly and much more efficiently than you could do by using voice. Now, the one thing I have had happen, which was odd the other day, I was doing some FT8 contacts. If you go look up my logbook, you'll see I do a lot of FT8 lately. And the FT8 contacts, suddenly I wasn't making contacts, and my radio was making a beeping noise every time it sent out. Well, something happened to the driver. I had to reinstall the driver. I have an ICOM 7100, and the radio has its own built-in modem. So it's a USB cord from the computer to the radio, which makes them very, very easy to use for this type of scenario. However, when that went down, it didn't know where the audio was supposed to go to, and that's what was throwing everything off. Once I reloaded the driver, everything was fine. So now I'll do a quick overview before I close here of what I'm using. I've got a refurbed Dell touchscreen, which I'll tell you, if you're going to use any of these modes, keyboard is important, but so is touch for a lot of things. If you're using the WSJT software suite and it's got that enable transmission and you can just touch things on the screen, or you're using the Ham Radio Deluxe and you could just touch the buttons on the screen, it's so much easier than having to move the mouse around all the time or use a trackpad. I have an ICOM 7100. My antennas outside, I've got a Diamond 300 for UHF VHF. It's a vertical antenna that has I'm going to say like a shroud over it. It's a plastic case over the outside of it, so it's not a bare wire that's exposed to the elements. And I have an off-center fed dipole that's got to be close to 50 feet in one direction. It's been a while since I bought it, so I don't quite remember. The other leg is shorter, obviously, as being off-center. That may go out another 20 feet on the other side. But I had to throw it up quickly, so the lion's share of the wire has the house on the back side of it, so I don't transmit too much. But that also means that the south side has a building in its way. It's clear east, west, and north, but south, not so much. And it seems to be working fairly well. So as I talked last time, I'm going to be putting together a end fed using the AH4 from ICOM, which is an auto tuner. Redid the numbers for it. 140 feet looks great for 80, but it doesn't give me quite the radiation patterns that I want for the other modes. So I'm probably going to go 70 feet, which is a 70 plus feet, which is a quarter feed or a quarter wavelength of 80, which will make the 40 work much better. And kind of clean things up a little bit. I think it'll work out better using a 70-footer on that. New post will go up next year, hopefully. That's what I said this year, but hopefully next year it'll go up. It's a 30-foot post. It'll get both the new 70-footer as well as it'll keep the off-center fed dipole. So it'll be higher. I'll pull the wires up higher so that they're not pointing down to the ground. Right now the dipole is only up maybe 6 feet on the ends from the ground, so it's not up as high as I'd like it to be. And we'll see how all of that works. Putting the switch in to, just like I have between the two radios that I've got, because I've got an Anytone 578 here as well, and the radios share the UHF VHF antenna. Well, I'll be having the reverse for the ICOM, where I'll have two switches that I need there, one for the regular tuner to go to the off-center dipole, and the other to go to the AH4. So I'm going to have the two control feed modules are going to have to be swapped from one to the other. And the output or the input, depending on which way you want to look at it, from the radio is going to have two options. One to go out to the end fed and the other to go off the off center. So that's what I got going on this year. Probably do more talk about emergency communications as time goes on. Obviously, it's near and dear to me right now, considering the fact that we just had a high wind warning last night of gusts up to 60 miles an hour, which did move a couple things around the house, but we actually got out of it fairly cleanly here. I didn't have a lot of trees down or anything, and snow. We're going to end up with a winter that's going to be really odd. From the start of it here, we've had a good amount of snow, and it's all melted again. So we'll see how the things go. But again, between snow and flooding at this time of the year and the winds, that's why I'm evaluating all of the possible emergency communication stuff that we can do. If you're interested in any of the digital nodes and the stuff that I'm working on and how it's going, I suggest you go over to communitystrong.us. It's communitystrong as one word, .us. It's a website that I'm putting together, putting up posts about the different digital nodes to use, the nets that I'm going to be running on those digital nodes, as well as a calendar at the bottom that shows what modes we're running in Vermont. If you want to try to jump into one of those HF modes and you're not in Vermont, by all means, give it a shot. And we're going to be putting the newsletters that I send out to the group are going to be on that site as well, so you can see the news and what we've had for the year. I have, in the state of Vermont, we have over 2,000 active hams. In the last couple of weeks, we've added 9 either upgrade licenses or new technician class licenses in the last month. So the hobby is still active. My goal of having this Community Strong site is to make it easier for people to find resources and bring more people into the hobby and hopefully into emergency communications. So that's what I got for you guys this week. I will talk to you all next week.